On December 6, 1865, Reconstruction began. Black codes instituted by mostly white governments had unexpected consequences. Segregated from white society, many black communities formed insular economic enclaves, carving out business niches in their communities without competition from whites. Two cities, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Durham, North Carolina, are examples of these economic enclaves. These two communities, both known as Black Wall Street, developed under like circumstances. However, one community was destroyed by hate and violence, while the other became a positive example of post-Reconstruction race relations in the South.
The two cities had similar beginnings. Before the war, the Piedmont was an area of mostly poor yeoman farmers who resented elite plantation owners for their wealth and classist attitudes and opposed joining the Confederacy. After Reconstruction, one area in the Piedmont, the city of Durham, blossomed into a commercial center for tobacco and textiles, and the formerly destitute region became a hotspot of industry. The black entrepreneur and Durhamite John Merrick used his newfound freedom to establish a chain of barbershops for both white and black men. One of his most loyal customers was Washington Duke, a man whose name had become synonymous with tobacco.
Well, I think that all the early accounts of John Merrick's life point to the fact that the Dukes and his other white customers vouched for him quite a bit.
Merrick's relationship with the Duke family would play a huge role in the development of Black Wall Street in Durham.
Meanwhile, the sleepy town of Tulsa became known as the oil capital of the world. Drawn by promises of wealth and land, white settlers moved west. Many were partially motivated by the racist myth of manifest destiny, and others were former slave owners. Recently freed slaves were also drawn to the area, which promised both an escape from the harsh Jim Crow laws of the Deep South and potentially enormous economic opportunities. J.B., John the Baptist Stratford, the son of a runaway slave, moved to Tulsa after hearing of economic opportunities there. Stratford and O.W. Gurley brought land and sold it to black businessmen, creating the Greenwood District, or so-called Black Wall Street.
In Durham, John Merrick, alongside other prominent black businessmen, Dr. Aaron M. Moore and Charles C. Spalding, purchased the North Carolina Mutual and Provident Association. The company quickly grew and in 1905 bought an office on Paris Street, making the area the center of the black community in Durham. By 1923, the company's assets would be almost $2 million. Durham's Paris Street expanded to include even more economic endeavors, including Bankers Fire Insurance, the Mechanics and Farmers Bank, manufacturers, churches, and schools.
They would do things on the weekends. There was a lot of programs that were specifically targeted to build the social and a lot of literacy programs.
In Tulsa, the Greenwood community was expanding steadily. A grocer, a real estate developer, a dentist, a physician, and a minister were all established on Archer Street. In 1918, J.B. Stratford built what would become the biggest black-owned hotel in America and became the richest black man in Tulsa. Before long, it was a thriving community for African Americans. However, its reputation wasn't just one of prosperous family businesses. White society often viewed the Greenwood District as a hidden world, but one that held a naughty fascination.
National black leader W.E.B. Du Bois praised Durham for its community's social and economic development, more striking than that of any other similar group in the nation, and Tulsa, saying, "I have never seen a colored community so highly organized as that of Tulsa."
Despite their successes, African Americans in Tulsa and Durham never reached the level of prosperity of their white counterparts.
What was happening in Black Wall Street was not that. It was more, again, of a main street where you'd have small mom-and-pop type operations.
When the North Carolina Mutual built their new headquarters, this amazing, beautiful building, which is now a National Historic Landmark, in 1924, it was 6 inches shorter than the tallest building on Main Street. So it's a monument to great success and ambition, but it's also an acknowledgement of the relationship between the races.
The two communities had similar beginnings, but as they grew, the differences between the Greenwood and Paris Street districts became more apparent.
In Durham, many successful white businessmen supported the black industry. Booker T. Washington described the attitudes of white men in Durham as the sanest attitude of the white people toward the black. The Morning Herald in Durham similarly proclaimed, "If a Negro is going down, for God's sake, let it be because of his own fault and not because of our pushing him down."
In Tulsa, economic troubles, crime, and corruption plagued the city, leading white Tulsans to fear that they were losing power, especially as the black community gained influence. Segregation became much more prevalent, and laws regarding interracial marriage and voting rights were instated. William H. Murray was one racist political figure who influenced such laws and regulations in Tulsa, along with writing The Negro's Place and Call of Race. Black Tulsans began to speak out about the racism of Tulsa, while many others moved to Canada, Liberia, or northern cities like Chicago. The KKK had been present in Oklahoma since its beginnings, and members held meetings in churches, schools, and even in the chambers of a prominent judge. KKK violence, such as lynchings, were not only common, but also attended by children and law enforcement alike. This was not an isolated trend. Around the country, racial tensions were increasing. In Wilmington, North Carolina, white supremacists overthrew the local government and expelled black leaders from the city, leading many blacks across the state, including in Durham, to call for reform. By the summer of 1919, a wave of racial violence spread across the country in an event called the Red Summer. The wave soon reached Tulsa. On May 31, 1921, a scream erupted from an elevator, containing Sarah Page, a white elevator operator, and Dick Rowland, a black shoeshiner. He ran. White Tulsa was furious. Police arrested Rowland. An armed black mob formed to protect Rowland, fearing he would be lynched. An armed white mob also formed to protect the white community from the black mob. The city erupted. The police, militia, and National Guard all intervened, and the initial riot became a massacre. The Greenwood District erupted in flames.
Aeroplanes were seen to fly, dropping bombs and high explosives. Hell was falling from the sky, with machine guns ready, mounted, trained upon 1,000 homes.
The next morning, the city was put under martial law, and African Americans were required to have passes to leave the Greenwood District. Although martial law was lifted not much later, the Greenwood District was destroyed, and it would never truly reach the grandeur it had held before the riot.
In Durham, a very different scene played out.
I mean, there were instances where, you had riots and threats of violence. And what was interesting to me is that the Dukes and other families would call on John Merrick, Dr. Moore, and C.C. Spalding and say, you know what can we do? Because we don't want to have something like what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina. So it was always kind of a tension, right, that one person could, set off and ignite some type of, major incident.
After the Wilmington race riot overthrew black politicians from office, John Merrick told his peers they should remain as close friends as possible with the white community to protect their businesses, and C.C. Spalding urged black reporters to stop when you have said enough. White Durhamites were tolerant, but most weren't accepting. Julian Carr, one of the most prominent supporters of the Paris Street community, was a proud Confederate whose most famous speech included the words, "I horsewhipped a Negro wench until her skirts hung in shreds, because upon the streets of this quiet village she had publicly insulted and maligned a Southern lady." Duke was a segregationist. However, Durham's Black Wall Street was able to stave off what seemed inevitable in almost every other Southern city in the U.S. Despite some ignorant beliefs, Carr and Duke invested in the African American community of Durham. Their investments paid off as black companies grew, and the positive attention attracted a greater black workforce for their businesses. The black upper class, in turn, compromised between the radical beliefs of W.E.B. Du Bois and the more moderate beliefs of Booker T. Washington, keeping the peace to protect their businesses.
There's no simple explanation for hatred. From slavery to the KKK to the Tulsa race riots to racism today, the motivation of racists seems as intangible as the pseudoscience that supports their beliefs.
Tulsa and Durham both tell the story of the American dream. However, in one city, those on top compromised on their values and ambitions to cultivate their businesses and investments. In the other, racist values and unchecked ambition drew the city into conflict. In one city, two groups, belittled by old Southern elites, found prosperity in the New South. In the other, power-hungry pioneers reinstituted the system of social stratification and inequality of the Old South. One could say that the violence in Tulsa, and the South as a whole, was inescapable. Durham may not have been perfect, or even progressive by today's standards, but Durham proves that peaceful coexistence between races after Reconstruction was possible, at least for a while. In the end, the cooperation of black and white people in Durham was not able to alleviate the racial tensions of the area. In the 1960s, racist urban renewal led to the decline of both black communities in both Durham and Tulsa. Today, the two communities are undergoing a revival. Durham took the path of compromise and passivity, Tulsa the path of conflict and violence, but ultimately they arrived in the same location.